everyone. As promised, I will be telling you guys my birth story in Costa Rica. Initially, I was going to write it and post it on my website as a blog, but it seems that I can't get past the labor part because it was a bit sensitive. Now, what's going to be included in this birth story is what I took when I was pregnant, like supplements and things of that nature. What I decided to do since I was pregnant and intended on doing unconventional parenting. So I'm just going to run you guys through from the moment that I got pregnant to when I was pregnant to when I went into labor to when I gave birth and thereafter in Costa Rica, because it's a totally different experience than what one would experience in America. I was already living in Costa Rica when I got pregnant. I was living in Arenal. That's a little higher up in the mountains, not too much on the Caribbean side, which is where I ended up for the remainder of my pregnancy, labor, and birth. I didn't plan my pregnancy, although the way I got pregnant, well, it was pretty obvious that I'd end up pregnant with what happened. I thought I was infertile. The last time I went to my GYN, she told me that I had an ovarian cyst. So when she told me that, I just kind of thought that my reproductive system wasn't good enough and that I couldn't conceive, even though she didn't say any of that. But I just kind of checked motherhood off of a list of things that I would, partake in this lifetime. So when I ended up pregnant, I didn't know what to think, because I had not in the slightest way planned to be a mother. So I was a little scared because I felt like there were a lot of emotional and spiritual issues that I wasn't dealing with, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't plan on being a mother. So I felt like there were some things that I could just put on the back burner because I wouldn't be affecting a little person. And to know that now I had to deal with them, it was a little, uncomfortable. So, initially I didn't know in the slightest way that I was pregnant. My son's dad actually was the one that woke up one morning and was like, go take a test. And I was like, I'm not pregnant. I don't feel pregnant. I'm not sleeping. I'm not sick. I've never been pregnant. I've been having sex for a pretty long time. I've never gotten pregnant, so I don't think that that's necessary. But if you want me to, if it makes you feel better, sure. So we went and got this little Spanish pregnancy test, and I just remember that 2 lines meant pregnant and 1 line meant not pregnant. And I've had so many pregnancy scares in my lifetime that I was like, this is going to be not pregnant, just like all the rest of the 400 that I've taken since I've been having sex. So, whatever. So I took it, and I was so confident that I wasn't pregnant. I just threw the stick on the bathtub and I was washing my hands and, dancing around, just not even a care in the world. And when I glanced back over at the stick, I was like, okay, all right, pregnant. And I called him and I was like, yo, come upstairs, because he ran off because I think he already intuitively knew that I was. I seriously didn't have a clue in the world. And for a second, we just sat there because at this time, I was like at the peak of my services, my business. This is when I started doing eye readings and I got fairly popular for it. So I was just in a mode of building and innovating and thinking of new ideas and new services. And I was just not even in the mode of motherhood or children or anything like that. I was still a child in many respects. So we sat there for a moment and we were just, he already has a son, mind you, so it was kind of like pressure from all angles for him, and for me it was just like I didn't think I could have kids. I didn't even think I could get pregnant. So initially I was fine. I didn't feel pregnant. I didn't feel different. I wasn't sick. I wasn't craving anything. I believe I was 6 weeks when I found out. And I was eating, initially I just kind of snapped into this mode of like, oh my God, I have to eat well. I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do that. And what's interesting that I didn't say was when I got pregnant, I was actually on shrooms. So I remember panicking about that, like, oh my God, I was on shrooms and I was pregnant, I didn't even know. And there were so many other things that I had been doing that just were unacceptable for me to be doing pregnant. So I was worried about that. I mean, I literally just sifted through every possible thing that I could worry about and just worried. And then I started immediately think I already eat, pretty well, but I was like even worse. Like, okay, I gotta eat well. I gotta eat all greens. I can't eat this. I gotta be careful. I gotta research everything. Like I just went into overdrive, and I was just so worried. And I ate, I was literally like just eating bowls of avocado and this thing called pehibaye. It's called palm fruit in English. And it was like my favorite food to eat in Costa Rica at the time. And I was eating that, and I was drinking green juices and smoothies, and everything was just, smooth sailing. And I believe like when I hit week 7 or 8, shit just got real. Like I got morning sickness, I started throwing up, and I already had a vomit phobia, so that was really hard for me. And I was just either nauseous all day or I was vomiting every other day. And it didn't matter what I ate. I was under the impression that maybe if I ate clean, I wouldn't throw up, or if I stayed away from processed foods or things that aren't the best to eat, that maybe I wouldn't throw up. But morning sickness is it's completely hormonal, I've learned. For instance, I would eat a salad, throw it right up. Pehibaye, the palm fruit that I told you guys I loved, I was completely repulsed at the smell of that. I couldn't even look at it or be around it. I would eat peanut butter and throw that up, but then I would eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch and I could stomach that. So in the beginning when I was the sickest, all I could eat was Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and his dad was just telling me like, so you on this wellness journey and you're just gonna eat processed foods? Like literally the only thing I could keep down were processed foods like Ritz crackers and Cinnamon Toast Crunch. We had an orange tree in the backyard, so I was eating a lot of oranges. I could keep that down, but anything else, just the smell of anything that was cooked was disgusting. So I went through that for about 3 months. And I got to a point where, well, before the 3-month mark hit, while I was still in the 6 to 8 week spectrum, I figured that I needed to go back to the US, because although Costa Rica was beautiful and we had orange trees in the backyard and all that good stuff, it was the tropics, I didn't have access to modern resources and their mailing system wasn't the best. So the way I needed my prenatals and my B12 and my DHA and my omegas, I didn't have access to any of that stuff. And a couple of people tried to mail those things to me, and they held it up and they would never mail it to me, I guess because you can't mail medication in Costa Rica. So we had a little conflict, and I was just like, look, I'm very hungry, everything makes me sick, and I need access to supplements. And I don't know what I can and can't eat. It's literally a hit or miss on a daily basis. So if I can't have access to these supplements to at least make up for when I can't eat a meal, that we're gonna have a serious problem. He's trying to tell me like, we're in the tropics, we have access to greens, we have access to all the organic fruits, we can pick them from our yard. But the thing was, a lot of the fruits that I would have been eating weren't in season. Like we had a mango tree back there, mangoes weren't in season, avocados weren't in season. When we went to the market, a lot of the greens that were just in season maybe a few months ago were no longer there. So I didn't have access to the fruits and vegetables that I primarily eat. So I was just like, look, you can stay here, but this is about the baby at this point, so I'm going to go back to the US, which is not what I wanted to do as far as what I perceived as the integrity of my pregnancy and my lifestyle, but I was more concerned with the health of the baby, So we returned to the States. I got all my prenatals, I got my B12 supplements, I got this omega and DHA blend, I got some alfalfa pills, which I didn't end up taking, but I'll get into that. That's more into my birth. So the prenatals that I took, just for anyone, because I'm more so plant-based in my lifestyle, I got MyKind Organics Garden of Life prenatals. They have the ones you take 3 times a day, and they also have 3-in-1. So I had the 3-in-1 initially. I was going to take the Rainbow brand, but there were so many additives in that. Even though it's marketed to be this clean product, when you actually read it, it's not as clean as you think it is. And all of this is like, just to give you an idea, berries, guava, lemon, moringa leaf, apple, broccoli, carrot, like all of the supplements and vitamins and nutrients that you would need are all plant-based in this prenatal. And one thing that my midwives, well, I was in contact with a lot of different midwives, but one thing that they told me was that folic acid is not what you should be taking when you're pregnant. You should be taking folate. Folic acid is the synthetic version of folate, and that's very important because it affects how your body absorbs it. Also, I was anemic, so being anemic, moderately at that, but being anemic at all can affect your pregnancy really bad. So for iron, I took this supplement called Floradix, and I took a capsule called Vitanica. Vitanica alone wasn't enough to meet the iron intake I needed, but Floradix was phenomenal, and it's all herbal, plant-based. So I was taking that. Now for the omega-3s and the DHA and EPA and vitamin D3, I took V Omega, and it's sourced from algae, I believe, 100% plant sourced. And I've read a few articles that said, oh, algae isn't enough for my child's fine. I was fine. I took this throughout my entire pregnancy. So that's that. I took a B12 supplement by the brand Vegan Safe. I think it took me about 2 or 3 bottles for my entire pregnancy. For this omega supplement, it took me about 2 bottles for my entire pregnancy. And for my prenatal, it took me about 2. And pretty much took them every day when I got back to the States, because of course the access to organic produce was a little more scarce when I returned, but I had access to more variety, you know, because everything made me sick. So if this thing made me sick, I could still have, you know, 100 other options to go for as far as my meals and, you know, just being fed, because it got to a point where I was so hungry, but I was scared to eat because I didn't know if I was going to throw it up. So I essentially came back to the States because I needed a meal, and I needed variety, and I needed consistent meals, consistently cooked meals, and I was repulsed by my own cooking. So I started to do a lot of research on what I could and could not eat, and what I found was that all the herbs that I had, I practically couldn't consume any of them. Like echinacea and all the detox herbs, Cascara sagrada, I couldn't take any of those. But what I could take was nettle leaf, red raspberry leaf, chamomile, and I kept it very strict because I didn't want to go out and just try something and affect the baby. I was really cutthroat with it. So what I drank every single day was red raspberry leaf, nettle leaf, and for chamomile if I just got tired of those 2. You can't eat moringa seeds either. I didn't know that at the time, but I ate a moringa seed and I got severe diarrhea. And I also read an article about a woman who thought that it would be great nutritionally to consume moringa seeds, and she ate like 10 of them and she lost her baby. So just for anyone who hasn't done adequate research to know that, that's a no-no. Don't take moringa seeds when you're pregnant. I also read that I needed to stay away from oregano and parsley in high quantities. Whenever I saw something that said in high quantities, I just stayed away from it. I didn't even toy with it. I didn't even want to risk it. They said stay away from turmeric in high quantities. I didn't even consume turmeric when I was pregnant, which sucked because I usually consume a lot of turmeric. One thing that I did overindulge in was ginger, because it helped with my indigestion and it helped with my morning sickness. Now morning sickness, I can't really recommend anything because nothing really helped because it was hormonal, you know. So what I did try to do is make sure that I had a big jug of orange juice that I just kind of drank to keep me full when I was just starving but couldn't stomach anything. Stock up on crackers. Crackers are great. Try to get organic crackers. At the time I didn't have them, so I wasn't eating them back in Costa Rica. But once I got back to the States, I started to experiment with what I did and didn't like, so I didn't really have a need for crackers. Now for indigestion, which was something I got terribly, which is like kind of like you eat and then it kind of feels like something stuck in your chest. It's disgusting, actually. It feels like you want to vomit, absent of the nausea. I took peppermint oil from doTERRA. As you guys know, I'm a doTERRA advocate, so I don't have peppermint on hand right now, but I do have a few of the oils that I use throughout my pregnancy and things. Now, in addition to peppermint, I also use lemon essential oils. Lemon is great for digestion, and you know, indigestion is related to digestion. So I alternated back and forth between peppermint and lemon. Toward the end of my pregnancy, I stopped taking peppermint and stuck to the lemon because peppermint can dry up breast milk, and I didn't know if I was going to be one of those mothers that produced while I was pregnant or after I had a baby. Some things that I did eat in abundance were lentils. I ate beans. I ate dates toward the end more so because I didn't really eat. I wasn't a date eater initially. I ate a lot of papaya, yucca. I ate a lot of avocado. I ate greens. I just tried to eat hearty meals, whether that be soup or potatoes or yams or lentils, you know, because another big concern that my midwives, I say midwives because I went through a lot of midwives before I got my midwife. Protein as a vegan, being pregnant, is very, 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 very important. Protein and iron, I can't stress that enough. And obviously DHA, so you need to get some kind of form of like pills like I have, algae sourced. Protein was very important, and it was like I felt like there was nothing that I could do to eat enough protein, and everybody was just telling me like, you're gonna have to go back and eat meat, you're gonna have to go back and eat fish, you're gonna have to do this and you're gonna have to do that. And I was just like, no, if I have to eat a bowl of beans a day, I would prefer to do that. And you know, it was scary because no one, unless they had done it themselves, which was far and few, maybe like 1 or 2 people, had vegan pregnancies, successful vegan pregnancies, where the child or the pregnancy wasn't, you know, lacking nutrition, where, you know, they had adequate protein supplements. And a lot of my midwives were saying, you know, combine greens and lentils and beans, and I was trying my hardest, but like the amount of beans that I would have had to eat to get an adequate amount of protein was just crazy. So that's something that I did struggle with. Not that it affected me, but I was petrified the entire time because I felt like I wouldn't have enough protein. So in addition to researching things that I couldn't eat, I just listed a few that I could think of off the top. I was reading this book called Ina May's Guide to Natural Childbirth, and she also has another one called Midwifery, Spiritual Midwifery. I didn't read that one because I think it's more for midwives or people that are interested in how midwifery works. But this was just something that I felt like I needed, and I got it as soon as I could. And the beginning is about, you know, a bunch of different birth stories. Some are cool, some are traumatic, some are beautiful, some are ugly. And I like the fact that they gave me a bunch of different perspectives. A lot of them, the woman did everything perfect and still couldn't get their natural birth. A lot of them, the woman didn't really care about the pregnancy as much as maybe someone like me, and wasn't as anal, and it, you know, it ended great. They had their nice natural water birth. So it started to stand out to me that the more emphasis I put on natural birth, the less likely that it might be that I would have one the way I wanted to have one. And then she kind of goes into everything you need to know from a natural perspective. So if you're pursuing a natural birth, I suggest you get this book and read it, because she touches on everything. Like, this book is fantastic. She did a really good job. And just to go through some of the contents, it's like the powerful mind and body connection, what happens in labor, the pain and pleasure riddle, sphincter law, which is a big one. It kind of explains how your cervix responds in the same way as your anus does. You know how you may go to the bathroom and you want to pass a bowel, but you can't because somebody's in the house or you're in public. Your cervix responds the same way. So imagine someone in a hospital with a bunch of strangers, aka nurses and doctors, and their labor not progressing because they're in a room with a bunch of people that they don't know and they don't feel comfortable with, and their cervix won't open up as a result. So that was something that stood out for me. It goes through the stages of labor. I'm not going to read all the contents, but definitely get this book. It's called Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. She's like the nation's leading midwife, obviously, so get this. So I stayed in the US from about 8 weeks or so, or 9 weeks, to I want to say 6 months. While I was in the US, I did go to a doctor twice because I just wanted to get a couple things out the way. I wanted to see what my blood was looking like, you know, what was missing, my protein levels, things of that nature. And although I had a lot of mixed feelings about sonograms, I only got 2. I got one at 12 weeks and I got another one at, I believe, 15 or 21, because I just wanted to make sure that he was moving, and I just wanted to see him, you know. But after that second one, he was telling me like, oh, you got to come back for a 15-minute sonogram, where they basically analyze every one of his organs. And I was like, I just told you I don't agree with sonograms. Why would I sit there for a 15-minute sonogram? I mean, even when he was doing the first 2, I just saw him wiggle a little bit, and I was like, all right, take it off. I don't want it. I just wanted to see that. Don't drag it. You know, give me a few pictures, and that's about it. I got a couple shots, you know, just to see what my protein levels and my iron levels were looking like. Which were very useful when it came to having a midwife later on, because some women don't want to deal with any of that. But having that paperwork was good when I got to Costa Rica, dealing with their system and dealing with my midwife, because she needed to know what she was dealing with. As much information as you can gather on yourself and your blood type and your overall health, the more the better for the midwife, especially if you're, you know, sourcing one that you haven't been working closely with throughout your entire pregnancy, which is what I did. I didn't have a midwife until the end of my pregnancy, actually. There were a lot of midwives. I call them cyber midwives. One's name was Lori Sanders. Shout out to her because she was amazing. She answered all my questions through my entire pregnancy. She didn't charge me a dime. I offered to send her money just for the information, and she just didn't accept my money. But any worry that I had, she just made me feel so much better. But she gives births, or she does births in Costa Rica and Guanacaste, and she travels around. And there was another woman that lived in the UK that was going to travel to do my birth, but I didn't feel that that was the best either because she was even further than all the other midwives. There was also a point where I wanted to move to Jamaica and Trinidad, and I was looking up midwives there, and I just didn't agree with what was going on politically in those countries. But I did talk to a Jamaican midwife, and she wasn't as, engaging as I would prefer her to be. And I found a facility in Trinidad, but, politically they just have a lot of unrest. So I ended up opting for Costa Rica when I realized that I had lived everywhere but the Caribbean side, which I heard a lot of great things about. So we did this whole thing about trying to move to Hawaii, to Jamaica, to Trinidad, and then we ended up going right back to Costa Rica, but to a brand new part, which is the Caribbean side in Puerto Viejo. So while I was in the States, like I said, I was sick until I was about 14 weeks, and I would maybe throw up here and there, and then it just all stopped by the time I was 4 months or 5 months or something like that. I drank a lot of water. I aim to drink a gallon a day, so if you have a water bottle that is 32 ounces, about 6 of those a day would be adequate for sufficient enough water intake. One thing that I did crave a lot, I didn't have that many cravings, but I craved spicy foods. I couldn't even eat food if it wasn't extremely irrationally spicy. A lot of people have conflicting views on that. They say that spicy foods aren't safe for pregnancy. If that were the case, my child wouldn't be here because I OD'd on spicy foods. I was using a lot of Trinidadian hot sauces, regular hot sauces, cayenne peppers. It was just, that was my craving my entire pregnancy. I couldn't get away from it. The reason I decided to give birth in Costa Rica is, one, obviously it's gorgeous. Two, I could have access to a lot of organically grown fruits and vegetables. I could pick my own fruits and vegetables, and I felt that that would be optimal nutritionally as far as my pregnancy went. But what I really, really wanted was to qualify to be a citizen, or a resident rather. And one of the many ways that you can become a resident in Costa Rica is by having your kid there, or retiring there, or investing into big property, or opening a business. And I wasn't doing any of the other ones, so I was like, I have to have him in Costa Rica so that me and his dad could get residency. So that was something I was hell-bent on. My family was really scared for me. They were like, oh, don't go, have him in the States. That's a third world country, it's not safe. You're not gonna have any family there, you're gonna need help. You need to come here, what if something goes wrong? And I just was like, this is what I'm doing. I don't care. I want residency. I want my son to have dual citizenship. I want him to have an option. If things go to the shitter in the U.S. and things aren't looking up and things aren't healthy or safe, I want him to have the option to relocate somewhere where he doesn't have to do visa runs or worry about getting deported or kicked out, So when I returned, a conflict that I had was midwives generally want to spend time with you from the moment you find out that you're pregnant, or at least 3 months and on. And I hadn't had a midwife within my vicinity watching me closely, keeping up with me, learning who I am, learning about different complications that can go wrong based on my own anatomy and things. So every midwife that I ran into, they were taking me in, but you could tell, they even voiced it, they were reluctant to work with me because they say, I don't work like this. I usually have the mom from about 3 to 4 months at the very least and on, so that I'm prepared for her birth, and I don't know you, I haven't sat around with you. You live 5 hours away in Puerto Viejo, I'm in Turrialba, so it's just going to be a complicated thing to learn your body and learn what's going to be best suited for your labor. So she ended up recommending me to someone that actually lived in the town that I lived in, who was pretty reputable as a midwife. And when I saw her, I fell in love because I had this whole image of who I thought my midwife was going to look like, or who I thought they were going to be. I can't say her name because, Costa Rica is very strict about midwives and things of that nature. And it's kind of like a witch hunt out there. Like, if they catch you delivering babies without your paperwork, even if you've been doing it for years, which is usually the case in Costa Rica, like with a lot of the older midwives that have been delivering babies within certain villages and communities for years, when they started requiring certifications, a lot of midwives just kind of stopped because they were cracking down on them. I found my midwife, and we started meeting up, and she tried to learn, a lot about me. She said that she also didn't work in that way where things were rushed, but she still took me in, which I was immensely grateful for. She only charged me $800 for my birth, which was very reasonable. in my opinion, and that also included postpartum care for a couple of weeks. Now, what I started experiencing toward the end of my birth, like inching into 30 and 32 weeks, was that my pelvic, now I have scoliosis, so my spinal cord is crooked. My pelvic bone was, I guess, preparing for birth, so it's separated from my body when I would walk. So sometimes I'd be walking and the bone would move out of place and I would just fall, like I couldn't even walk after a point. So that's something that people may not tell you about, because I didn't hear anything like that in my life. I didn't know that happened. And even though there was nobody in my family that had even done a natural birth, let alone breastfed or gave birth abroad or was vegan, that fact just made the pressure so much heavier, but that didn't make it impossible for me. Now, before I went into labor, like I said, the only things that started changing or getting uncomfortable was my pelvic bone moving out of place, just being big and being in a hot environment such as the tropics, and also my son wasn't head down, and my midwife told me that if I didn't do something to put him head down, that she wouldn't deliver my baby. So I panicked and I looked up this website called Spinning Babies, and it helps you to do it yourself as far as moving your baby or putting it in an optimal position for birth. And there was this exercise where I had to basically, at 8 months pregnant, get on my head with my knees on the couch and sway my hips from side to side to move him head down. I also went to this guy, and you know, the town that I was in Costa Rica was very spiritual. This guy that did energy work, not Reiki per se, although it probably falls in the same category. He did a lot of energy work where he could, you know, let loose a lot of different knots and blockages and dammed up energy in your body. So I went to get that done, and he told me that the last time he did that on a pregnant woman, she actually went into labor. So after he did that exercise on me, I probably went into labor like a day or two after. So he is a natural induction specialist as far as I'm concerned, but that wasn't what I was trying to do. I was just really trying to relax and, you know, get his input on, you know, what my body was saying, because he also read into your body where there's tension. He could feel the baby's energy, and he told me some cool things. It was a really cool experience, you know, to be going to somebody that did energy work instead of like another GYN or a doctor, you know. So I went into labor. My son was born on June 2nd. That was a Saturday, so I went into labor that Thursday morning, I believe. Thursday at 4 in the morning. Or Friday at 4 in the morning. One of the two. Because I labored for 48 plus hours. I'm not good with numbers or math, so you guys do the math. But I went into labor about 4 a.m. and I knew I was in labor because I had a terrible stomach ache, and I was like, oh my God, my stomach hurts. And I went to the bathroom and I passed a bowel, and the stomach ache didn't stop. So I was like, oh my God, I think I'm in labor. I had also heard all these stories of women going into false labor, and I didn't want to wake everybody up and get everybody excited when I actually wasn't in labor. So my cousin was like, tell everybody anyway, don't chance it. So I woke my son's dad up and I was like, yo, I think I'm in labor. And he's like, no, you're not, go to sleep. So my friend Sarah, who actually ended up being a doula for me, and because she was our roommate at the time, but she didn't intend on being my doula, but our story is crazy. Like literally when I met her, I didn't really take to her, but she always kept up with me on Facebook. And then I met up with her again in town when I was pregnant, and I looked at her and I said, I need you at my birth. I don't know why, but you need to be there. I can't do it without you. I didn't know this girl from a hole in the wall. Shortly after that, she ended up moving in with me after that visit, and she was my roommate ever since. So she was in the other room, and I got up and I went in her room and I was like, Sarah, I think I'm in labor. And she was like, great, let's get ready. So I tell my midwife, and she comes and she's like, oh, this is nothing, you know, call me, and you know, when things are actually happening, like maybe your mucus plug falls out, or, you know, contractions start getting intense or something like that. And when I tell you guys, me and my son's dad as a unit were so unprepared for everything. Like, we were literally irresponsible children when it came to the preparation of getting everything ready for birth, making sure everything the midwife needed was there. Everything was so unorganized, and Sarah literally saved my ass this entire process. I mean, from feeding me before labor every day when I was like starving because I had an abnormal appetite. Like the hunger hurt. Like I could eat 3 bowls of food and I would still be hungry, and I didn't even want to eat anymore. But I guess because I'm vegan, I had to eat a lot. And so, you know, labor was cool. You know, what I was feeling was actually contractions, and I was like, oh, this is easy peasy. I'm doing, you know, exercises that I see on videos, and Sarah's rubbing my lower back, and I'm like, this is great. I can cruise right through this. And my midwife was like, oh, it's gonna get a lot worse. And I remember being angry at her, like, why would you say something to me like that? But she was keeping it real. And a few hours later, I was like, oh, this is deep, but I still got it. You know, I'm telling everybody I got this almost masochistic relationship with pain, so I'm gonna just glide through labor, and they're looking at me like, okay. And so getting through it, Sarah's pushing on my lower back, and my son's dad still doesn't really believe that I'm in labor. He thinks I'm being dramatic, or maybe, you know, in a false labor. And then I went to pee, boom, mucus plug falls out, and I'm like, oh, I'm really in labor. Even like I was startled, because I'm like, oh, this is really it. He's really coming. And increasingly the contractions got increasingly worse. And then it's like almost as if I blinked and I was like, and it was just increasingly worse. You know, that's the only way that I could describe it. It just got worse and worse. Now, mind you, if it wasn't implied already, I intended on having an all-natural, epidural-free, medication-free, natural home birth. I wanted a water birth. She brought the tub, but when she told me what I had to do, the way our water system was set up in the tropics at that house, we didn't always have access to hot water unless it was the shower. So the hose in which we had to use to fill up the tub was not going to be warm, and keeping it warm was going to be another thing. And I could tell that midwife wasn't the most well-versed at doing a water birth. She just had it on hand if you wanted it, and if you wanted it, you had to do the work. Whereas the midwife in Turrialba, she always did water births, so she had the heating system set up in the house that you would rent out. She had the tub, she knew how to fill it up, she knew how to keep it warm. So it was a different situation. So when she told me everything that we all had to do, in addition to everything that we were extremely unprepared for, I was like, forget water. I was in so much pain. I didn't even care about water, to be honest with you. So the water birth went out, but I was still pursuing the natural birth. Now, fast forward, my labor was just getting really, really, really intense. Now, prior to going into labor, me and my midwife were doing exercises about healing, because she was aligned with this woman right here, Ina May, her philosophies and her birthing techniques and things like that, which I loved. So she was familiar with healing trauma from our mothers and our grandmothers, and addressing fears and pains and things of that nature that could affect our labors. And I remember the last exercise I did before I went into labor was, you know, forgiving my mother for her trauma that she, you know, held on to in birthing me, and my grandmother the same, and her mother the same, and her mother the same, and imagining them behind me holding my shoulder and being there with me through my birth. And I remember it making me really emotional, because my mother died from HIV, AIDS. And I was a C-section baby because she had AIDS when she was pregnant with me, and thankfully I didn't get it. Had she passed me through her birth canal, I probably would have had HIV. And through her whole entire pregnancy, she was petrified, you know, so there was a lot of irrational fears that I had when I was pregnant that I had no reason to have, because I didn't have a life-threatening disease that could infect my baby. I didn't have any of the circumstantial triggers that she had, yet here I was living out her fears, you know, and she passed away. So it was really interesting. And then on top of that, my grandmother had 6 kids. Maybe the first 2 were natural with the midwife at home, but the rest of them were in the hospital because the trends were just changing. And we even went through that at the last meeting that my midwife and I had. We had a bunch of other mothers that were pregnant in the area in Costa Rica, and they were all speaking about how their mothers had conventional births, but their grandmothers and back, they were having natural births at home with midwives. So it was interesting to see how Western civilization influenced birth almost just recently. It wasn't even like this whole C-section phenomenon was even a thing just a couple of years ago. This was a more recent thing that started happening. But before that, our grandmothers were giving births at home, and when they said, oh, go to the hospital, they kind of just went with it, you know, and did away with the whole natural thing. And they put a lot of fear in mothers' hearts, you know, with getting C-sections and saying things like, oh, the baby's heart rate is irregular, we gotta cut you. My son's heart rate was irregular when I was in labor, and that was because I was in so much pain that I'm assuming, common sense, you know, if I'm in a lot of pain and he's connected to me, he's feeling my frustration and my tension. So that obviously just makes his heart rate fluctuate, but that doesn't mean that he's gonna die or that you have to cut me open to get him out. Now, it did scare my midwife because she had a baby die, you know, with one of her births. And it wasn't because of her, you know, the baby's heart rate being irregular. The baby had a heart condition way before she had labored with the woman, you know, went into her labor and her birth, and that she didn't know about, and that the woman didn't know about, and that she didn't take care of. So it was really, I guess, the mother's lack of responsibility or just being on top of things. But as a midwife, you naturally just feel responsible because you're not in a hospital. You're doing things unconventionally. This mother's relying on you, and boom, the baby dies. She's thinking, you know, this has something to do with me. And it didn't. The baby had a heart condition prior. So my whole entire birth, you know, she had a heart monitor as a gift, you know, because she stopped doing births for a while because of that birth experience. So I was kind of like maybe her first or second one since then. And she was getting back in the mode. But literally every person that I went and talked to around town, there were 2 midwives that were really good. She was one of them, and there was another woman, and they were the only 2 in circulation in that town. So she was reputable, but she was dealing with her own trauma as far as, you know, doing births went. And she kept monitoring. She had a heart monitor for the baby that she was using, and she was just hell-bent on checking his heart rate the entire time, which made me more fearful because I'm like, what am I supposed to do if his heart rate goes up? You're just going to send me right to the hospital because his heart rate fluctuated, you know? But she was being super, super safe, which I can't fault her for because, you know, everything falls back on her. But she told me, like, Nicole, if you don't calm down, because at this point I'm like hysterical, like I'm screaming, I'm biting my friend Sarah, because mind you, my midwife had her own personal doula, but Sarah was my doula. Her doula, the doula that she had with her was great for other reasons, but the role that I needed her doula to play, my friend Sarah played. I mean, listen, from giving me back rubs to cooking for me, I bit her, I squeezed her arm, I punched her, I slapped her, like she was my punching bag, like, and she took it all because she had already did a natural birth herself with her son a few years back. I think her son is about 6 now. So she knows a natural birth, and she did it successfully in water. So what also was interesting was that at one point in my labor, I just felt so isolated because everybody was just like, Nicole, if you don't calm down, she's not going to do your birth. Nicole, if you don't calm down, we're going to send you to a hospital. Nicole, if you don't calm down, you know, this, and this. If you want to have this natural birth, you have to take charge. You have to be a woman. You're acting like a little girl. Like, they were saying things like this to me. And I was like, this is my first laboring experience. Like, what do you expect me to act like? And in this book, there was a lady that was in labor and was just as hysterical as me, according to what I read, if not worse. And one of the midwives got naked with her and went through the contractions with her. And my friend Sarah did the same thing with me. And she literally, like, told me to get naked. And I sat down in the shower, and Sarah got naked with me. And she went through every contraction with me. And it was at that moment that I was like, doulas are important. Because my midwife was more responsible for the more biological, technical things. And, you know, just making sure that things were going the way that they needed to. And she already warned me before my labor that she's really there to sit back and watch me because my body knows what it needs to do. So one thing that I realized, you know, in all of this, especially when I went into labor, was that I wasn't being real with myself. I was afraid to give birth the entire time. Even though I was pushing this natural thing and this unconventional thing, I was afraid. And not once did I come out and come to my son's dad or the midwife or a friend or anyone and say, look, I'm scared. Because I was scared that they were going to, you know, throw me down the conventional route and say, oh, you're scared, go to a hospital. Go to a hospital, just go to a hospital because you're safe there. And I've heard too many traumatic stories about hospital births and how much they just impose and try to force you into C-sections and don't respect your wishes and don't advocate, aren't advocates for midwives. So hospital was just so out of the picture. But this other woman that helped me a lot, her name is Phoenix Wild on Instagram. I wrote her as well. And she told me that you need to be okay with any outcome. You know, you can pursue this natural labor and this water birth or whatever you want to pursue in a natural, beautiful, but at the end of the day, your child chooses how he comes earthside, and you need to align with that and not your own mentally constructed wishes. So I made peace with that before I went into labor, but it didn't it still didn't make me feel comfortable enough to say, yo, I don't feel that my body's capable of pushing this boy out. I'm afraid. There's a lot of things in my relationship that are unresolved. I'm not really particularly happy. I don't feel nurtured. I don't feel supported. There were all these sentiments that my cervix was probably responding to. And, you know, I read about it all in the childbirth book, but I just kind of detached myself from it, like that couldn't apply to me, you know, but I was afraid the entire time. And that's, I feel, a contributor to why my labor was so long and so turbulent. It got to a point where my midwife was like, why don't you come to my house? You know, we can go there, you can get a different scenery, we can go outside, da 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 da. And we drive over to her house, and I was just at the point where I was like, maybe I was 30 hours in at this point. I was like, I want to go to a clinic. And my son's dad was like, yo, that defeats the whole purpose. We didn't want him to get vaccinated. We didn't want him to do this. We didn't want to do this. And they're going to try to make you do epidural, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like crying, like, and then my friend Sarah butted in and was like, y'all, because between my son's dad saying, yo, that's defeating the purpose of our plan, my midwife was like, you don't sound like a laboring woman or a mother. You sound like a scared little girl, and you're going to have to toughen up and deliver this baby because you're the one that's going to deliver him, not us. So between those two perspectives, I was just heartbroken. I was in the car on my way to the midwife's house, and I just laid on the window and I just cried. I just cried, like boo-hoo crying. Like, I knew I had to deliver my son, but I also knew that I was getting tired. I hadn't slept. I couldn't sleep through the contractions. My midwife kept saying, sleep, sleep. You need to sleep, Nicole. You need to sleep, or you're not going to have strength for birth. And I was like, I can't sleep because I'm in too much pain. So I hadn't slept since I went into labor. I hadn't gotten any adequate rest. Now, my son's dad, and this goes into the support that I feel women need from dads, he has a son. He had a son before my son. And she did the conventional route. She went into labor. She maybe labored for 6 hours. It got too painful. She got an epidural, and the rest was history. You know, he didn't have to be there for her through 30, 48 hours of labor doing these exercises that he wasn't familiar with, which ties into our lack of being prepared. But he wasn't familiar with the support that's required for a natural birth or labor. So he wasn't as supportive as I needed him to be in the way that I felt like he should have just naturally known. But if I look back on it, we just weren't prepared. We didn't do the adequate research. We were as prepared as a couple that intended on going to the hospital and doing it conventionally. Seriously. I did research on, perineum massages so that tearing is minimal, which I did do. I got some Primrose oil, if anybody's read about that. You basically take a little and you stretch out your perineum and massage it for about 30 minutes so that you don't tear. I did that, and it was just like, I feel like had I been honest about my fears, maybe if I had been honest about my fears, and had I been more responsible as far as discipline and research and just us coming together as a couple and being a part of the process of birth and labor and child conception as a collective together, we would have had a midwife sooner. We would have had everything prepared, the items, everything needed. We would have done the research. He would have known how to support me physically and emotionally. I would have known the support that I would have required or needed. Everything could have went so different had we just been adults. And it was at that moment that I felt like we both were still children. My son's dad had realized that all he could do was just be there and do what I said, and just don't underestimate the level of pain a woman can be in during childbirth, and don't think about yourself at all. If there's any moment in a relationship where you choose not to think about yourself, it's while your partner is laboring. Seriously. Don't think about your sleep, your rest, your comfort. She's carrying a whole ass baby and has to deliver him earthside safely, So he became selfless toward the end, but throughout my whole labor, I can't say that he was the most selfless person, because, like I said, he had never even gone through that before. He didn't even know what was required of him on the emotional level. Because, like I said, the last birth that he attended with his last son was just conventional. All he had to do was stand there and just stand there and wait for him, It was easy. This wasn't easy for either one of us. And I feel like that day, a mother was born, a baby was born, and a father was born, but in a whole another way, Now what ended up happening, and this is where things get a little traumatic, which is where I tend to get choked up. my midwife sat me down and was like, because at this point I'm on the floor screaming and I'm screaming and I can't deal. And then my body started pushing involuntarily because I believe it got desperate. So instead of me just going through contractions, it shifted into this, and I had to catch my breath for like 5 seconds. And then it would make me push. Like I wasn't trying to push and it felt like my butt was gonna explode. Like it was the craziest thing ever. So what ended up happening was my midwife sat me down and said, look, Nicole, you need to surrender. You know, this isn't about you. This is about the baby's safety. And I know you want your natural birth and this and that, but you need to surrender and put it in the hands of someone who can help your labor progress more, because I've tried everything. You know, I had pushed a little bit at the house. I had, you know, I did the squatting position to push. I pushed on the little thing she had for pushing. I laid in my son's dad's arms and I pushed a little bit, and he just wasn't getting past a certain point, even though she could feel his head right there, which was the saddest part. You know, I was that close to doing it, but I needed to push. So we got to the clinic and she told me, listen, they don't play about midwives. You don't say anything about this being a natural birth. You say nothing about my name. Don't mention my name. Don't mention anything. Just say that, you know, you didn't know you were in labor until it got intense, and, you know, that's why you're here. Now, when giving birth in Costa Rica, what she recommended was going into the clinic to get a regular checkup. So I went in, I got a little, I think I got a feel up by one of the doctors just so that they could put my name on file in the event that I end up at the hospital, so that I don't have any like trouble. So I did that prior to my labor. I meant to note that. But back to that, she told me I needed to go to the clinic, which I wanted to do hours ago, but you know, the pressure of having a natural birth and proving to my midwife that I wasn't a little girl and that I could do this birth made me, you know, just tough it out for a couple more hours. And by that time, I was just completely exhausted and screaming and crying. It was really intense. And so I got to the clinic and she said, you need to keep yourself leveled, because in Costa Rica, I know America's bad, but in Costa Rica, it's like you have no say. So if you go in there screaming and acting crazy, they're going to give you an epidural whether you want one or not. Or if they feel like you need a C-section, they're going to give you one whether you feel like you need one or not. So the new challenge now is acting like I'm not in as much pain as I am, 1. And 2, acting as though my body's not involuntarily making me push. So I get there, and usually when my midwife checks me, she waits until after the contraction. This doctor came in and he's like, I need to check her. And so I get up on the table, I lay down, he just shoves his fingers inside of me. He goes like this baby needs to come out now. Because my friend Sarah's with me, she speaks fluent Spanish. Like I said, couldn't have done it without her. And she just kept reminding me, like, don't put up a fight, because that's the quickest way to end up with your willpower snatched away even more than it already is, and that's the quickest way to end up having a birth that you really don't want to have. So I had to be mute in all of this pain, right? Now my plan was to have a natural birth, do a lotus birth, delay umbilical cord clamping, and having a lotus birth, which is when I keep the placenta and then either bury it or encapsulate it. I hadn't decided yet. But he shoved his fingers inside of me during a contraction, and I remember being on the table like it knocked the wind out of me, because I was in so much pain, and he was just putting me in more pain with his fingers. And he just took his fingers out, took the glove off, and he's like, she needs to push him out now. And so I didn't even really have time to think, and they just laid me on this table, and I remember looking to my right, and it looked like it was like a blood stain on the curtain. Like, third world, I hate using that word because they actually live purer, more wholesome lives than we do in Western civilization, in my opinion, even, you know, without the modern technology. But they didn't have the hygienic standard or the quality of equipment or anything that the States had, you know. And they were way more vicious, or at least this doctor was. What was interesting was, had I been honest with myself when I wanted to go to the clinic earlier on, when my son's dad was like, oh, we want a natural birth, why you want to go to the clinic? And when my midwife was calling me a little girl, there was a doctor there, another woman that my midwife was delivering. She ended up at the clinic, and she ended up with a doctor who respected all of her wishes. And when I said I wanted to go to the clinic the first time, that doctor was there, and I would have been able to do the natural, easygoing birth that I wanted to do. He would have let me keep the placenta. He would have let me do this and this and this and that. But because I was like, nah, I got to prove something to somebody, I labored longer and that doctor left, and this horrendous doctor was my doctor, and he was just rough, insensitive. He acted like I wasn't even a person. So I lay on this slanted, I wouldn't even call it a bed, it was just a mat with on a like it looked like a tray with a little plush. He laid me back on there. There was no railings really. There was just the foot part to kick my legs up like you would at a gynecologist's office, and there was no pillow, there was no sheet, and he just started preparing. He hooked me up. The guy hooked me up to an IV. He didn't know what he was doing. Like, he stuck it in, and then blood squirted everywhere. He pulled it out, stuck it in again. Like, he didn't know what he was doing. And I looked at him like, what the? And Sarah was just like, shush, because she didn't want me to say anything or imply anything that would make me have a worse experience than I was already having. And he shoved his fingers up there again, and I was just acting like I was not in any pain when I was in the worst pain of my life. And then he wanted to give me Pitocin because obviously my labor wasn't progressing as fast. And I was mad because I was like, I wanted 100% natural, but the midwife that I told you guys about, Lori Sanders, she works with Pitocin as well. And that's just like a little nudge. Like, if your contractions aren't strong enough to get the baby through the canal, it just makes your contractions like 1,000 times stronger. It kind of has the same qualities of oxytocin, according to my midwife, and it's going through the IV. And he's like, as soon as you feel the need to push, push. And when I tell you guys, those contractions just came like, God, I thought I was in pain before. It was the most excruciating, forceful pain that I ever felt in my life. No epidural, no painkillers, no nothing. I felt everything. And I was like, I had to push because I wanted to cry, but it was too much pain to cry. I wanted to react, but I had to push because I just had to push. Like, there was no space for I couldn't react to how carelessly the doctor was handling me. I couldn't react to how he just propped my legs open and was just shoving things inside and outside of me and spraying me with all kinds of antibac. Like, he just wasn't gentle. He just acted like this was just another thing that he was doing. Like, I wasn't a person. And, you know, I just started pushing, and he wasn't even ready because he didn't think that I would have the desire to push that fast, maybe. But I just started pushing with all my might, and I remember it was a point where I was like, I can't do this, because I just kept saying I couldn't, and they wouldn't let his dad be near me because they just didn't want him near me. So I had to keep looking at my son's dad by the door. And he was just watching me from a distance. But my friend Sarah, the only reason they allowed her behind me is because she spoke fluent Spanish and there was a language barrier. And I was pushing and it hurt so bad. Like, I felt him moving through my body. I felt my bones separate. I felt it when his head was crowning, and Sarah was telling me everything. Like, she was watching from, like, she was standing up. I was like this. I wasn't laying on my back, but I was tilted a little bit at an angle, and she was standing behind me holding my shoulders, watching, you know, what was going on, and talking to the doctor and translating for me. And everything that I requested, he just said no, it's protocol or something like that. And I remember looking at my son's dad, like, I really wanted him to be like right there, but he was like all the way at the door. And I was pushing, and she was like, you got it, you got this. Like, Sarah saved my life, because I don't think I could have delivered him without her. The things that she was telling me, like, throughout my labor, even before I started giving birth, was like, you have to show no fear, you have to be fearless, you know. She was just telling me things that I didn't even believe. But it got to a point where I had to believe her. I had to believe that I could do it. I had to, because if I didn't, I felt like I was gonna die. And there was this thing that this girl, Phoenix Wild, told me. She was like, there's a point in birth where you choose life or death. And I remember being on that table, and I was like, if I don't push him out, I'm gonna die or he's gonna die. Point blank, period. And I had to find this source of strength that I didn't know I had. And I was just like screaming and pushing, and she was like, his head, I see his head is out, he's crowning, and she's like walking me through everything verbally. And I was like, okay, his head is out, that means I just have to push the body. And I'm feeling everything. I felt myself tear because it burned. I guess that's what they call the ring of fire. And Sarah's just cheering me on. And I remember times like glancing at his dad, and his dad was just in the corner, like, couldn't even do anything or say anything or have a voice, and he was just crying. because it was crazy because he had just got involved and just started being active in my labor, and then it's like he was snatched out of the process when I needed him the most. And then when his body, I did one big last push. I maybe pushed him out in like 5 pushes. And when I felt his body passed out, I passed out for like 3 seconds, because that's just surreal when you feel limbs and stuff come out of you. Like, I wasn't numb, you know, so I felt his whole body come out, and it was just like the pain just stopped. And then he didn't cry, but his eyes were open. He was just, his name is Sheru. It means lion in Hindi. I don't know if you guys seen the Netflix movie, but I got it from the little boy from that movie because he was so intuitive and mature for a 5-year-old, and I just was inspired to name him that. And his eyes were just open, and then he grabbed my umbilical cord, and we were like, I was like, please don't cut it. I was so like out of it. And Sarah was like speaking Spanish, trying to get him to cut it, and he just cut my umbilical cord. And anybody who knows me knows that I had done so much research about how that could temporarily suffocate the baby, and how they're not done getting the blood from the placenta. Even after they come out, it's good to keep them connected. And I was just like, everything he was doing was just chipping away at my heart, because it was my body. You know what I'm saying? It was my body. It was my baby. It was my birth. How could you make decisions for me? They're supposed to be my decision. So at that point, I'm just laying there, like, just feeling so disempowered, but happy, because my son's here, and he's just looking around. Like, they lay him on me for a second, and he just looks up at me, and then they take him away again because they want to clean him up. And as soon as they took him away, he just started screaming. And I remember all I could say was, my baby, give me my baby. My baby wants me. My baby, give me my baby. And then my son's dad walks over to where he's laying, and they tried to tell him he couldn't come stand near his son just to watch. And I was like, that's his father. He can watch y'all if he wants to. And then my friend Sarah's like, don't say that, because it's like, I literally have to play chess with these people, or they'll either feel that I'm an unfit mother or do something else crazy against my will. So it's just like, whatever at this point, you know, do whatever the fuck you want to do, because you're going to do it anyway. And they brought him back over to me. And I remember just being relieved that I had him. Like, and then the lady just grabbed my titty and squeezed it real hard. And I was like, ouch. And then she just shoved my titty in his mouth. And that was the colostrum, I suppose, the liquid gold. And my milk, I guess, started flowing at that point. So I was like, oh yay, I produced milk, because I was scared that I might not produce milk. Because so my midwife told me that some women produce during, some women produce after. I was one of the women that produced breast milk after. And then they had to transfer me to a hospital in Limon, because this was a clinic. They don't do births. They're equipped to do births. Not really, but they have to send me to a hospital for the paperwork and the this and the that. So they said you have to wait for an ambulance. An ambulance is coming. We wait. A van shows up. They tried to tell my son's dad he couldn't come, but something happened. We got lucky and he was able to come, but Sarah couldn't come. So Sarah didn't come for the rest of the process, but she was there for what she needed to be there for, because like I said, I couldn't have done it without her. Shout out to her for saving me and my son's life, because from being able to translate, to going through the pain with me, to cooking for me, to just being there, it was just more than I could have asked for from anyone that was involved. And she never complained, not one time. She never complained. And then when the ride to the hospital came, it was just a van. And they put me in this diaper and told me that I couldn't sit up or move for 6 hours. So I'm laying on this flat thing, not a bed, no pillow, no nothing, just these sheets. And I'm laying with my newborn, and I'm waiting for this ambulance, they called it, but it was a van. And they just pushed me in there on this flat thing with no pillow, no nothing. It's not a bed, like I said, with my son in the back of a dark van. And we drove an hour and some change all the way to Limon, to the hospital. And I was laying in this bloody diaper because I'm bleeding excessively, obviously. And I had to pee, and I kept telling him I have to pee. And he said, pee in the diaper. And I was like, I'm not peeing in the diaper. An hour into the ride, I was like, I'm going to explode. I have to pee. So I ended up having to pee in the diaper, and I peed everywhere in the van. Just pee everywhere. So now I'm sitting in pee and blood. I get to Limon, and I met the first empathetic doctor that I had ran into that day. And I remember I was like, because I kept having to pee. Like, I just had to pee. And I asked him, like, can I use the bathroom? He's like, you can't sit up. You're too weak. I'm like, I can stand up. I just need to use the bathroom. And they took my son, and he was like weighing him or something like that. And I went to the bathroom, and blood just was falling everywhere. Like, I got blood on the seat, on the walls. I was just bleeding excessively, and I peed. And the doctor came in, and he was just like looking at me, and I was like, can you help me? And he helped. He cleaned me up. I was like, I need another diaper because this one's full of blood. And he's like, oh, we don't have diapers here. And he gave me a robe to just shove under myself. So now I'm in a robe, using a robe to catch the blood. And then they take me up to get some blood work and get some blood work taken from Sharu. And check his eyesight and his hearing and things like that. And I sent, my son's dad to go with him while he did that. And they took blood work from me, and we sat there for hours. Then they pushed me out into a hallway with some other mothers that had just given birth, and they said they're waiting to put us into the room. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get my own room, United States style. When they finally finished, and these people were nice, they made me tea. I was really hungry. They brought me some snacks. They were really nice at the moment in the hospital, the doctors, prior to when I went to the room. So then they said they're going to take me into the place where they put mothers after they give birth, and there were like 20 women in there, and I was like, where's my room? She was like, choose a bed. So it's basically like an orphanage for moms that just gave birth. C-section moms were over here, natural births were over here. And then the man gave me a thing to put my baby in, and he was like standing there, and he was like, take your clothes off and shower. And I was like, what? So I walked in the shower, and he's watching me the entire time. And because he said I need to wash the blood off. So he's watching me, and he's like, no, wash more. And I'm like trying, because the water's ice cold, there's no hot water. And then when I walked in, there was blood from other women there, and I was like, you expect me to shower in here? He was like, what do you expect? They all just gave birth. So I'm like trying to step around these spots of blood from women that also just gave birth, that just showered. And I had to shower in there, and he just kept telling me to wash more until he felt that I was washed enough. And he basically watched me take a shower. And at that point, what was uncomfortable, like I had just been violated beyond reason. And then I went to my bed in the corner, and I slept with my baby. I was in the hospital for about a day and a half. They woke me up 5 a.m. Miss, you need blood work. And I'm literally in the bed like, what? And they just took my arm, took some shots, went back to sleep, woke me up again. You need to take a shower, and you need to bathe your baby. Gave me a little metal pot with some not warm water, and that's the first time that I allowed myself to put up a fight. Like, this water's not warm. My child needs warm water. He's a newborn. And she's like, it's not cold. I'm like, it's cold. So she makes me bathe him in this little bucket. And they're watching us closely because Costa Rica doesn't play about child care, and they want to make sure that we're responsible mothers before they release us. My son did end up getting 1 vaccination they're supposed to get 3 hepatitis B vaccinations, and they can't give them all at the same time, but they gave him 1 because he was obviously in the hospital. I thought they didn't, but when I looked at his arm, I seen a little red dot, and I was like, what the hell is this? And I was talking to my midwife, and she was like, they're all natural, and she had done lengthy research, and she said the hepatitis B one was the least invasive of all of them. And then I contacted the other reputable midwife from Puerto, and she said that she could detox it from his cells or out of his system on a cellular level. So I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. It wasn't multiple vaccines and something that couldn't be purged from his system. So I just sucked that up. But what I did get lucky with is I got this book, and with that book I wouldn't have a hard time with the Costa Rican system. Whereas had I had a natural birth at home, I would have had to make up all these lies and have all these people sign these documents and go through all this stuff that could put me at risk for, a lot of different, legal things that I wasn't supposed to be doing. So it was a breath of fresh air that I got that booklet, because my midwife was like, as long as you have that booklet, you can do whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? You can fill out whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Just that booklet is your ticket to just navigate it through this system as someone who gave birth abroad. And so I stayed there for longer than I wanted to, just sleeping alongside of a bunch of different women, and made some friends. I didn't speak fluent Spanish, but I spoke enough. And we would take turns watching one another's babies while one went to the bathroom and things like that. Some nurses were really nasty, others were really nice. I told them I was vegan. They cooked for us every day, so they would make sure that my meals were vegan. And it was cool. It was an experience. You know, it wasn't anything like the clinic experience, but then we were able to go home, and then I met up with my midwife, and I wanted to tell her how horrendous it was. And she was like, she didn't even really want to hear it. She was like, all that matters is that he's healthy, he's here, you're okay. She checked me, she saw my 2 stitches. Oh, not to mention, the guy just, after I tore, he just stuck me with the anesthesia. Didn't even ask me, you know, what I wanted or didn't want. And he stitched me up like right after, you know, and it was really, the whole thing was disturbing, honestly. And then my midwife checked my stitches, and they weren't dissolvable stitches because they don't have the modern things that we have, so my midwife had to manually remove them in a couple of days. And she just kept coming to check me every day and check the baby and make sure I had a good latch. I had a bad latch at first, so I was bleeding a little bit, but I believe the technique she taught me was like, don't put your breast in his mouth, put his head onto your breast. And after I did that, we were good to go, and it wasn't painful ever since. Breastfeeding wasn't painful at all for me. A ton when it comes to you feeling supported or feeling like you have someone that can handle your process. My midwife, I found, was very fear-based in a lot of ways, which is what I was avoiding with the doctors. But she had a lot of fears that she hadn't particularly 100% dealt with, and that affected my process, you know, because I could sense that a lot of what she was doing wasn't just natural protocol. A lot of it was fear, and it affected me a lot. The doula that she brought was amazing. She was really cuddly. She wasn't as impactful as my friend Sarah. My friend Sarah isn't a technical doula, but she was my doula, and she changed the whole game for me as far as birthing is concerned. But the doula that my midwife had on hand, she was very motherly. She was what I think my mother would have been had she been here. She cradled me a lot. She kissed me a lot. She just rocked with me back and forth. I bit her too. We had a language barrier going on, so she couldn't really say much to me because she spoke Spanish and not much English. But her nurturing maternal energy meant a lot to me, especially as someone who lost their mother. So everyone had their role. You know, my midwife reflected my fears back onto me. Her doula was the maternal force, and Sarah was just my rock. And my son's dad, he was just my partner. You know, he wasn't this Superman that I wanted him to be. He wasn't the ultimate support system that I needed him to be. He wasn't initiative driven the way I wanted or preferred him to be, but he was there with me, going through it with me, you know, and we both came out totally different people. Like, there was a point in labor where he was a little boy to me through the whole thing, just complaining, and he wanted sleep and he wanted this, and I was so annoyed, I remember. But then something clicked at some point, like, yo, she's in pain. This is not about me. She needs me. And he just went into daddy mode. He just went into labor mode. Like, and from that point on, he was everything that I needed him to be and more. It was like a 360 transformation. So it was beautiful to watch, you know, so I can focus on the negative aspects and complain and be a negative Nancy, but, you know, I also was being a little girl about a lot of different things and just being a diva, so to speak. And we both kind of like turned into parents before he even got here and just owned up to our responsibilities and what we had to do. So it was dope. So I wouldn't label him as anything more but my life partner. You know, he was my friend, he was there. And he wasn't showing up for himself or me in ways that he needed to at first, but when he realized that he needed to, he did. And I honor his process just as much as I honored mine and anyone else that was involved. And I encourage women to not be so harsh on your partners either, because I had to remember he had never done that before. You know, he never had to be involved or support a woman through, you know, all that stuff. 'Cause like I said, we were just as prepared as somebody who was doing a conventional birth, but wanted all these extra accommodations, but we hadn't prepared ourselves for it at all. So if you want to pursue this, plan, not to say that it will go as planned, but have your corners covered so that you can relax and so that you're not making somebody, whether it be your doula or your partner or your midwife, overexert themselves because you're irresponsible or you're not prepared, you know. Breastfeeding tips, this is where I'm going to end it. I used Fennel when my milk supply was abundant immediately, but as he got older and required more food, I had to overeat, and to encourage letdown on days when I probably didn't eat enough, I would use Fennel essential oil from my company DoTERRA. Same company as I used for my lemon and my peppermint when I had bad indigestion while pregnant. I would apply Fennel to my breasts with some coconut oil diluted, and within seconds I could feel a letdown coming, or if I let him drink after that, the letdown would just be stimulated a lot faster. And I would also put a drop in my tea sometimes, like if I was making nettle tea or any kind of tea, I would just put a drop in it. It tastes kind of like sweet licorice, and that's what I use for breast milk production. Sometimes I drink actual fennel tea. Then my friend, her named Jasmine, her website is souldivinity.com, like SOLDIVINITY, I believe, .com. She's going out of the country for a while, so you may not be able to access her, but she made me a bosom balm, she made me herbs, she made me organic baby powder, she made me a little, mama package, which was cool. And I just want to give thanks for everyone who supported me throughout my pregnancy, throughout my labor, and beyond. And just to name a few, of course, my dear Sarah, my son's dad, my partner, my best friend, Hakeem, or Raku as you guys know him. I want to thank Ahimsa for after my birth and after my labor, just being there to support me and Shiru. When we were hungry and when we just needed support, because there was a lot of emotional turmoil that I experienced thereafter. And Ahimsa was just there for me. That's his godmother. I want to thank my friend Shauna for just covering me. There were days where I didn't have any money to my name and I needed a meal. I want to thank Lauren for being there when, we lost electricity when I was pregnant and I was so hungry and we had no electricity and no means of transportation, and the whole Puerto didn't have any lights, or at least where I was didn't have any lights, and she picked me up and took me to get food. And I want to thank Maka for coming over to cook me meals from time to time, and giving me a ride once when I needed a ride into town. I want to thank Basil for showing up and bringing me food or giving me rides to different places to handle paperwork after coming from the hospital. And I just want to thank everybody that showed up for me, Thank you for my family that I completely rejected because they weren't unconventional and I didn't feel that they could help me or support me in ways that I needed. I was totally wrong about that. Even though they didn't agree with what I was doing and they were scared shitless because no one in my family had ever done it, they still loved me and supported me nonetheless. And I want to encourage people to not reject their families or look at them as just your Babylon family, because even if they don't support what you're trying to do, they'll be there for you in the ways that they can and to the capacity that they can. And you have to give thanks that you even have that, because some people have no one, And especially after I gave birth, they were very supportive and helping me with different appointments and paying for doctor's visits. And just when I'm trying to get back on my feet and get into the mode of motherhood as an entrepreneur is very complicated. Time management and just having a baby that's just so attached to me and feeds from me. I can't get as much done or make as much money as quick or as efficiently as I used to be able to. So support in whatever way that people can offer is necessary, even if you want it in a certain way or you want them to have the same views as you. You can't be that rigid because you lose out on a lot of benefits and blessings. So that is my birth story. I'm sure I've left out plenty of details, but I told you what I felt intuitively led to tell you. Got a little emotional, which is why it took me so long. I know a lot of people have been waiting for my birth story. Like I said, I know I've left a lot out. Thank you guys for showing up, for listening, for tuning in. I hope I gave you enough tips. I hope I stated everything that I said I was going to state. And if not, I do plan on going live so that I can answer some more questions that you guys may have. And I want to thank you guys for always supporting me through my spiritual endeavors, my emotional endeavors, my emotional upheavals, everything. You guys are the best. And I look forward to engaging with you guys on the same level when we return to the tropics, because that'll be another journey within itself, raising my son in an environment that none of